To their church and community, Pastor Tracy Burleson and his wife Paulette presented themselves as stable, upstanding, God-fearing people. Behind closed doors, however, their volatile marriage was marred by infidelity, domestic abuse, and predatory behavior. And when one of them decides it's time to put the marriage out of its misery, the other will get a bullet. Hello and welcome to The Dark Side of Love. I'm your host, Bianca Sloan, author of suspense novels about the dark side of love. And this week I'm putting a spotlight on the case I'm calling the unholiest of unions. Houston native Paulette Ross was born and raised in the city's historical Fifth Ward, northeast of downtown. Paulette came from an extremely religious family where there was an emphasis on attending church on a regular basis. Her sister, Fanny Aaron, described her to Oxygen's Snapped killer couples as a little girl who liked helping around the house and saw hard work as a way to achieve her dreams and make a better life for herself. Paulette would go on to marry and have 2 little boys when she was in her 20s, but the marriage did not last. In the wake of her divorce, Paulette decided to turn back to her faith and on her sister's advice began attending First New Mount Calvary Baptist Church with her 2 children. Parishioner Pamela Robertson described Paulette to Snapped as someone who was well-kept and friendly. And Paulette found herself getting friendly with the choir's drummer, Tracy Burleson. 27-year-old Tracy, who had called First New Mount Calvary Baptist Church home since he was a kid, dreamt of becoming the church's pastor. Described by his friend Dirk Foote to Snapped as charismatic, Tracy was 12 years younger than Paulette, but the couple didn't let that stand in their way. The attraction was too strong, and as Paulette's sister told Snapped, Tracy was a go-getter. He was smart, extremely devout, all of which only added to Paulette's attraction. According to friends, Paulette was head over heels with the enigmatic Tracy, and within a year of meeting, Tracy and Paulette tied the knot. Marriage meant blending their families, which included Paulette's 2 sons, but also Tracy's son, William Fuller, who lives with his mother, Sharon. William was born with sickle cell anemia, which is a blood disorder where the cells die too soon, leading to a lack of healthy blood cells and inhibited blood flow. It's a debilitating disease, and it causes pain, fatigue, and infections. William suffered from a bone infection, seizures, and pneumonia as a result of the disease, so this poor kid, he really has a hard time of it. And according to what his mother Sharon told Snapped, they spent more time at Texas Children's Hospital than they did at home, due to the ravages of the disease on her son. Because William was so sick all the time, Tracy and Paulette had a stable home, and it was decided that it might be a better environment for William and his illness to live with them. So, when he was 11 years old, he moved in with Tracy and Paulette's 2 boys. As the family settles into their new dynamic, Tracy realizes his lifelong dream when in 2008 he's ordained as a minister and tapped to be head pastor of his childhood church, First New Mount Calvary. Paulette also ascends to the throne, becoming First Lady of the church, which brings lots of prominence, prestige, and respect. From the outside, the family seems perfect. A fine and upstanding family unit holding up the ideals of the church that had been entrusted to them. But appearances deceiving, things not being what they seem, that's what is actually going on. For starters, the Burleson household was an abusive one. Tracy and Paulette fought constantly, engaging not only in knockdown, drag-out screaming matches, but getting into physical confrontations that involved baseball bats and knife fights. According to the Beaumont Enterprise, William intervened once and got stabbed himself. Paulette, who had initially welcomed William with open arms when she married Tracy, turned on the little boy, becoming abusive towards him. He said she teased him about having sickle cell and that she would do things like sprinkle rice on the pavement and force William to kneel on it while he held up the Bible from sun up to sundown. The Daily Mirror reported that there were also irons, wooden boards, and extension cords used to abuse William, as well as Paulette's other two sons. Eventually, William files charges against his stepmother, which lands her in court, and in exchange for avoiding jail, she agreed to take parenting and anger management classes and basically go on probation. So she essentially gets out of serving any kind of jail time for what she did to William. And Tracy, Father of the Year, doing nothing to defend his son from Paulette's rages, even conspired with his wife to steal the disability benefits that William received due to his sickle cell, the couple using the money for themselves. And when William enrolled in the nursing program at Texas Southern University, he received a stipend of $5,000 per semester, and Tracy and Paulette stole that too. So Tracy and Paulette are not good people, despite what they were portraying to the church and the community. On top of that, which all of this is bad enough, Tracy treated his son like a buddy, a pal, telling him all about his numerous sexual escapades outside the marriage, which is disgusting. And most of the women, I wouldn't be surprised if all of the women, were parishioners at the church. As William himself said, he knew all of his father's secrets. A common theme of these father-son chats was Tracy's seething hatred of his wife. He expressed how desperately he wanted to get away from her, wishing on a star that, quote, "Man, sometimes I wish she would die." But Paulette, that crafty chick, she continued to thwart his plans because, as Tracy told his son, quote, "She don't even get sick. How dare she?" Finally, in 2009, William was able to escape this toxic, crazy, abusive household, and he moved in with his best friend, Tyon Palmer. Tyon was a nurse and felt for William's struggles and everything he'd been through and the abuse that he had suffered at the hands of his stepmother, and she decided that she would take on the role of being his caregiver. So not only was William getting the benefit of living with his best friend, Tyon could also help take care of him and help him with his ongoing health issues, so taking him to doctor's appointments and even helping take care of him during the times that he was in the hospital as a result of the sickle cell anemia. So this is a good thing for William, all the way around. William quickly became a part of Tyon's family, helping the single mother with her 3 kids, and in the process finding a much-needed respite from the horrors of living with Tracy and Paulette. A few months after moving in with Tyon, William brought her to 1st New Mount Cavalry and introduced her to his father. Tracy, never one to let an opportunity pass him by, gave his son a note to give to Tyon, basically saying, "Hey, even though I'm married, don't be fooled by that. And wow, you have such a pretty smile." Tracy really starts to put the hard press on Tyon. He really woos her. He sends her flowers, he sends her candy, he takes her on these great dates. And that was pretty much it. Not long after that, the married Tracy and the married but separated Tyon were singing "Glory, Glory, Hallelujah" for a whole nother reason. And despite being married to other people, the relationship progressed to the point of the couple becoming engaged. And they even carried out this engagement by posing for family pictures and making everyone think that they would soon be husband and wife and one big happy family. Now, Tracy has a few problems here. One, obviously, is Paulette. It's kind of hard to marry another woman when you already have a wife. I mean, this is not an episode of Sister Wives because neither Paulette or Tyon are going for that. And second, the deacons of 1st New Mount had made it clear to Tracy that this was their policy, that the pastor of their church should be living a clean, upstanding life, and as such, if they ever found out that their pastor was having any kind of extramarital affair, it would be deuces for Tracy. Well, like so many cheating men before him, and sure to be so many cheating men after him, Tracy wants to have his cake and eat it too. He's not giving up the church, and he's not giving up Tyon. However, in May of 2010, Tracy has bigger problems than juggling a wife, and a girlfriend. On May 12th, flames ripped through the 93-year-old church during the early morning hours, leaving behind a shell of bricks and ash. Paulette was interviewed by local TV station Fox 26, telling them, quote, "God wants us to keep our focus on Him. If we take our focus off God, believe me, world, we have nothing." While Tracy pleaded for whatever funds viewers could provide to help the church rebuild because they needed every and anything possible to get back on their feet. While authorities deemed it to be arson, it's not long, a matter of days in fact, before things are about to go from bad to all hell breaking loose. May 18th, 2010. It was a Tuesday evening. Paulette and Tracy were out in front of their house doing what they do best, which is arguing. And apparently they were going at it so loudly that neighbors several houses away could very easily hear them cursing and yelling at each other. Eventually, Tracy says, "Time out. I'm hungry. I'm going down to the corner store for some snacks." So he hops in his car, heads out for a candy bar, something to drink. According to Tracy, when he arrived home, he found Paulette sprawled across the front yard, blood everywhere. Tracy immediately calls 911, screaming to dispatchers, "Somebody shot my wife! Somebody shot my wife!" Police race to the scene, and when they get there, Tracy's shirt is soaked with blood. He's hysterical, at one point getting down on the ground next to Paulette, demanding that she get up. Tracy is just, he's all over the place, and quite frankly, he's getting in the way. So the cops eventually handcuff him and put him in the patrol car so that they can continue their investigation. It is determined that Paulette was shot execution style in the back of the head, and she dies at the scene. Paulette Burleson was 56 years old. Now, because Tracy had found Paulette and because he's the husband, police test his hands for gunshot residue, but they don't find any. They take him in for questioning, and Tracy repeats his story that he went to the convenience store for a drink and a candy bar and came home to find his wife had been shot. He proclaims his innocence and says emphatically that he did not shoot Paulette. So police say to him, "Listen, we checked, and the store that you say that you went to, it was closed during the time that you say that you were there." So now Tracy changes his story and says, "Well, I did drive to the store, but then I saw it was closed, so I turned around and I came home." He admits to police that because he found Paulette, he decided he would need an alibi, so he lied that he was at the store, which it's moronic, but all right, fine. Not the brain trust here, but okay. So like I said, the residue test that police had performed on Tracy's hand, it comes back on his hands. It comes back clean, but there is clear evidence that points to Tracy having something to do with Paulette's murder. At the very least, that he was there when it happened. For one, immediately before the shooting, as I mentioned earlier, neighbors told police about Tracy and Paulette arguing. So there's that, like right before the gunshot. Then Paulette's blood was found on the front of Tracy's car, like on the grill on the front, as well as on his car keys, which the car keys, okay, maybe the keys were in his hand when he found her and he bent down in the blood, and okay. But the blood on the grill, there's really no way to explain that unless he was there. There's no reason for there to be any blood on the front of his car because remember, he was supposedly off buying this mythical Baby Ruth candy bar and something to drink. And there was a spent shell casing found next to the tire of Tracy's car. And the shell casing, it wasn't run over, which means the car was just sitting there at the time that that shell casing landed on the ground. Well, while this is incredibly overwhelming evidence of guilt, it's not enough. So police dig into Tracy and Paulette's marriage, and they learn that not everyone at the church was enamored with Pastor Burleson or his first lady. As the Daily Mirror reported, Paulette was not a terribly friendly person, which is interesting. I wonder, because her previously parishioner had mentioned that she was friendly, and I wonder if maybe once she became First Lady, that all stopped. But she really wasn't connecting with the members of her congregation. And Tracy, for his part, was constantly putting the hard sell on his parishioners to tithe more, to stuff the collection plate to the brim, that they weren't doing enough. He would send out formal letters telling them that if they didn't pay their dues, they were done, no longer welcome at the church. So he's kind of a hard ass. And frankly, given how they stole money from William, it's really not a far leap to think they were probably using the church as a piggy bank. And in fact, according to the Daily Mirror, after the church's roof was torn off by Hurricane Ike in 2008, they received FEMA money to repair the roof. But mysteriously, the roof didn't get fixed, but Tracy and Paulette turned up with new cars not long after. Tracy had also been caught with members of his congregation a few times in his office and in, let's just say, some unholy positions, which the congregation did not like that. Tracy himself told police that it was possible that someone from the church was out to get him and Paulette, telling them about the church being burned down and now this. But it's too much of a coincidence, right? And it turns out that police aren't quite ready to go there. But when their investigation turns up a court case involving Paulette's abuse of Tracy's son, William, that gets their attention. Maybe William, who admittedly hated his stepmother, murdered her as revenge. Police have a hard time believing that one, though, because one, William is sick all the time. He's not this like super healthy specimen. And two, he was described as having a passive personality, not really someone who you would think would run out, get a gun, and shoot somebody. So because William was living with his caregiver, Tyon, who, remember, is having this tawdry, super secret love affair with his father, Tracy, police do have to question her. And she says she was at work at the time of the murder and that William was not there when she got home that night, but that he was somewhere on the south side of the city and that she had gone to pick him up. Well, at this point, police hit a wall with the case, and it starts to look as though the trail is going to go cold, and there's nothing they can do about it. Until an anonymous tip comes in that blows everything to kingdom come. Paulette Reeves, a family friend, approaches police to say that she knows who killed Paulette Burleson. She says it was 21-year-old William Fuller, Tracy's son, Paulette's stepson. So let's rewind. Remember earlier I was telling you about how completely inappropriate Tracy was with his son, telling him all about his sexual conquests, using him to deliver love letters to Tyon, whining about how much he hated Paulette, how he just wished she would die, but she had the bad taste to not even get sick. Well, if Paulette wouldn't do him the courtesy of just dying a natural death, Tracy would just have to help matters along. Now, Tracy's not going to dirty his hands by committing this unholiest of sins. Oh, no, not this devout man of God. No, he wants his son to do it. That's right. For years, Tracy had been pressing William to take Paulette out, even physically assaulting him to force him to do it. Tracy claimed that he had been through too much with her to simply walk away scot-free. He wanted a little something for his trouble, namely the $60,000 life insurance policy that he had on his wife. And as if that wasn't bad enough, which is already beyond despicable, once Tracy and Tyon, Mrs. Williams' caregiver and self-described best friend, start sleeping together, the two of them work together to convince William to just pull the trigger already. Absolutely insane. Absolutely unbelievable. Tracy promised William a cut of the insurance money, about $3,000, as well as Tyon's car, if he would just kill Paulette. Tyon is so confident that William will do it, She even buys a gun for him to use to carry out the murder. Finally, because on the one hand, he idolizes his father because of Tyon, because of the double teaming he's getting from both of them, because his father is hitting him as a means of getting him to kill for him, William agrees to kill his stepmother. According to William, he and his father discussed how it should all go down. Tracy would pick a fight with Paulette to distract her. Then he'd call William on this walkie-talkie phone that he had for William to get over to the house and do it now. Done and done. So that night, Tracy and Paulette are outside, and as planned, Tracy starts arguing with his wife, then sent the signal to William to get moving. Get over here. William walked over to his father's house, passing the arguing couple to go inside the house. His father followed him inside to confirm that he had the gun, and then he said, "Come on, it's go time." Tracy goes back outside and picks up his argument with Paulette, who's sitting on a lawn chair facing the street. Tracy is standing in front of his car. William comes out of the house, walks up behind Paulette, aims at the back of his stepmother's head, and pulls the trigger. One shot, and Paulette was dead. According to court documents, William said he froze, and it wasn't until his father shook him out of his stupor and told him, quote, "Get out of there so they could call the laws," that he snapped back to life. Tyon picked William up and they drove to her cousin's house on the other side of town so that he could take a shower and get cleaned up. They also made a pit stop at the bayou so that he could get rid of the gun. William told authorities that despite throwing it over the embankment, he knew for a fact that it did not land in the water. So at this point, because there's been no arrest, everyone's thinking they're home free. Just sit back and wait for that sweet, sweet insurance money to kick in. And speaking of insurance, Tyon decided to take a little policy out of her own by having sex with William 2 days after the murder. Turns out that William was in love with Tyon. Now, as the Beaumont Enterprise reported, he termed what he felt for her as platonic love, but he did have her name and her lips tattooed on his neck, so I would say that was a little more than platonic. Frankly, I think he probably really was in love with her, and she knew that, which is why it wasn't hard to entice this poor kid into bed. And she did this, I'm sure, to keep him in line, keep him close, keep him from spilling the tea about this sordid, murderous little entanglement that the three of them have going. It's disgusting. But the bliss is shattered, however, when Tracy moves into the house, which that's not going to cause a problem, not at all. And it's not long before father and son are battling over Tyon, the woman that they are both involved with. But more importantly, the weight of what he's done is weighing heavily on William. He tells his father that he wants to turn himself in, and Tracy's response is to kick his son out of the house. Needing to unburden himself to someone, William turns to his friend Paulette and tells her everything. And she in turn tells the police, who of course are stunned about this. They did not have William on their bingo card. But they need definitive proof. So they tap Paulette's phone and ask her to get William to repeat the story he told her about Paulette's murder. After getting William on tape confessing all, Paulette tips the cops that William is at a gas station and it's there that he is arrested for murdering his stepmother. At first, William denies that he had anything to do with the murder. Then he begs for the cops to bring Tyon to the station and he'll tell them everything. Finally, William, he cracks and admits that yes, he killed Paulette because of how much he hated her, because of the way she had abused him all those years. And eventually, William shares that it was in fact his father who urged him to kill Paulette in exchange for a portion of Paulette's insurance money. William directs police to where they can find the gun, and after running ballistics tests on it and determining that it was the murder weapon, Coupled with William's confession, they have what they need to arrest Tracy and Tyon. They head to Tyon's house, and when Tracy and Tyon open the door, they are wearing matching pink pajamas. Sounds like a Hallmark movie, doesn't it? Tracy insists that he had absolutely nothing to do with Paulette's murder, telling Fox 26 in Houston that he didn't know who killed his wife, and when asked if he wanted to send a message to his parishioners, he said, quote, that I didn't do this. I didn't do it. While Tracy had been plotting Paulette's murder for years, the investigation revealed that besides hating his wife, wanting her insurance money, and wanting to marry Tyon, there may have been another big reason why Tracy wanted Paulette out of the way. Now, according to what sources close to the investigation told Fox 26 in Houston, Tracy had forced William to burn down the church so that he could collect the insurance money a few days before Paulette's murder, and that Paulette had found out about it. According to William, however, Tracy and Paulette together torched the building, so who knows? Now, Damon Crawford, who was one of the church deacons, he would testify that after he and Tracy inspected the damage from the fire, Tracy said, quote, now that the church is burned down, I've got one more thing to get rid of. And 6 days later, Paulette was dead. I have to say, what Damon Crawford said, that kind of lends credence to the idea that Tracy, at the very least, had something to do with burning down the church. Now, whether he put William up to it, I feel like William would have confessed to it because he's confessing to everything else. He didn't want to carry the burden of these things. Or, I don't know, Tracy lit the match himself, and maybe Paulette was threatening to blow the whistle. So it's just one more box to check on the I must murder my wife checklist, I don't know. Who knows? Parishioners at the church are, of course, shocked at their pastor being charged with murder, and naturally, many of them don't want to believe it. Earl Jackson, who was an assistant pastor at New Mount Calvary, told Fox 26 that, quote, common sense prevails a lot. A lot of things did not add up, but I refused to just say he was guilty. Edward Payton, another member of the congregation, told the station, quote, for us to not know the other part of his life, it shocked me. I was looking at him being my pastor. Well, pastor or not, after he's arrested, Tracy cops to the affair with Tyon, but keeps insisting he is totally in the dark about anything to do with Paulette's murder. Now, his girlfriend Tyon says that she found out about the plot after the deed was done and does admit to picking William up from the scene that night, but didn't have clue one that he had just murdered his stepmother. Well, thanks to that pesky little thing known as technology, police have checked the cell phone records of all involved and learned that Tracy was, of course, at the house at the time Paulette was killed, not getting this candy bar from the store, and William was also at the scene that night. There is just too much evidence against the trio, and they were all charged with capital murder. Because he agreed to help the prosecution with their case against his father, including testifying against Tracy and Tyon, William, in exchange, must plead guilty and gets a maximum sentence of 20 years. Tracy and Tyon's trials commenced separately in September of 2011, with William testifying against his father and former lover. Tracy, because he was the mastermind of this plot, was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without any possibility of parole whatsoever. While jurors in Tyon's trial took pity on her, and instead of sentencing her to life, which is what prosecutors asked for, she was sentenced to 7 years for the murder charge and 10 years probation for tampering with evidence. She was released after serving 3.5 years of her sentence. William first became eligible for parole in 2020, but was denied. He is expected to be released in 2030. Paulette's son, John Ross, has absolutely no love lost for his stepfather, telling Fox 26, quote, he orchestrated that to get rid of my mom and collect insurance money. He had too much to lose if he allowed her to open her mouth, so he had to shut her up. He was a womanizer, a user. He was not a man. He did not have a backbone. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of The Dark Side of Love. I'm your host, Bianca Sloan, and show your love for The Dark Side of Love by visiting thedarksideoflove.com for show notes and transcripts. Also, while you're there, you can find a link to my Patreon page where you can access bonus material and other fun stuff. Learn more about my suspense novels about the dark side of love by visiting biancasloan.com. Thanks again for hanging out with me, and join me next time for another tale of love gone wrong. I'll see you on the dark side.